Andy still in Henderson? Okay. Okay. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Last week, Andy talked to you about, and reasons to believe about Jesus. And Andy approached it from a secular standpoint about historical and the historical implications of Jesus, lots of historical evidence. He talked about things from ancient historians, from archaeology, and other things. Tonight, we're going to look at the claims that Jesus made from a scriptural standpoint. So we're going to be looking into the Bible, and I'm going to have about 5 passages read tonight. I'm going to go ahead and have some of y'all turn to it. Someone volunteer to read Acts 2, verses 22 through 24. Okay, Barry. Mike, would you get Mark 6, 1 through 6? Okay, David, could I get you to read John 12, 9 through 11? Ellis, 1 Corinthians 15, 3 through 8. And Jerry, would you mind reading Matthew 26, 59 through 66? Okay, some of those it'll be a few minutes before we get to. There are 3 different things we're going to look at, 3 broad categories about the evidence of Jesus that we can see in the Bible. And the evidence we're looking for is the evidence that He is who He said He was. He is the Son of God. First, we're going to look at the miracles of Jesus. We're going to look at, I've got 4 reasons on here. There's really a 5th one I'm going to talk about too. I didn't notice that till I'd already printed this and was ready to go, so I'll just bring that one out. But we're going to look at some reasons why miracles of Christ can show us that He's not just an ordinary person. He had to be something more than just a regular man. In John 14, verse 11, we read this. This is Jesus. Believe me that I am in the Father and the Father in me, or else believe me for the sake of the works themselves. I think what Jesus is saying here is, if you're not going to believe me because I tell you, at least believe me because of all the signs and wonders you've seen. Because the people that have been with Jesus and seen Him had seen inexplicable things. We'll talk about some of those tonight, but they've seen things that can't possibly be explained by human wisdom or by human power. There had to be something else. So Jesus is telling them, if you're not going to believe me when I tell you I'm from the Father, believe the works that you saw. Barry, would you read Acts 2, 22 through 24? This is from the sermon on the day of Pentecost.
Men of Israel, listen to these words. Jesus the Nazarene, a man attested to you by God, with miracles and wonders and signs which God performed through Him in your midst, just as you yourself know. This man, delivered over by the predetermined plan and foreknowledge of God, you nailed to a cross by the hands of godless men and put him to death. But God raised him up again, putting an end to the agony of death, since it was impossible for him to be held in its power.
Okay, back in the verse 22, as Peter's preaching to the crowd that was present on the day of Pentecost, he's reminding them of Jesus, and this is a man attested by God by miracles, wonders, and signs. So Peter mentioned those three things as evidence, and surely some of those people that were there on the day of Pentecost had witnessed that themselves. At least the disciples had, or the apostles. But I'm sure there were many people on the day of Pentecost listening to Peter that they had either actually seen with their own eyes the things that Jesus did, or they had close relatives or friends that had seen Jesus do some of these things and had told them about it. And Peter is reminding them of that. So let's look at 5 things that we can learn from the miracles of Jesus that make them pretty strong argument for the fact that he's who he said he was. First of all, the miracles of Jesus weren't done in a closet. He didn't do it alone or with 1 or 2 people and say, hey, guess what I did? You should have seen it. Some of the miracles were kind of in private. Like, I guess you could say when he raised the girl from the dead, and he only took, I think, Peter with him and the parents. But even then, the people outside knew that the girl was dead, and when she comes out alive, they were witnesses. They didn't see the actual miracle happen, but they were witnesses as a result. But a lot of the miracles that Jesus did were in front of great crowds of people. 2 obvious examples we can think of: when he fed the 5,000, when he fed the 4,000. And I've heard speculation, and I'm not sure on this, that when it says 4,000 men, some people say, well, that's men like humans, and some people say, no, that was the men. They counted the men, and there would have been probably more women and children that were there. So what we read as being 5,000 might have been 10 to 12,000. I don't know. It doesn't really matter to me if it's 5,000 or 12,000. A lot of people witnessed the miracle of Jesus when he fed a multitude of people with just one lunch. Same thing happened with the 4,000. So this was done in a crowd. When he healed the paralytic who was let through the roof, why did they have to let him through the roof? Anybody remember? Yeah, the crowd. There were so many people in the house or the building he was in, they couldn't get in. I can't imagine being there, and I don't know what the roof was made out of. In my mind, I think of stone houses, but surely they didn't cut on a stone roof because it would have killed whoever was standing underneath it. So I don't know if it was plaster or what it was on the roof, but I can imagine the people underneath where they cut in the roof to bring it down, wondering what in the world is going on here. And then, as amazing as that probably would have been, to see what Jesus actually did. Well, there was a house full of people that witnessed that. So they were eyewitnesses of his miracles. When he turned the water into wine at the wedding feast, there would have been a big crowd at the wedding feast. They know what Jesus did. Lazarus, when he raised Lazarus from the dead, there were people that knew that he had done that because he wasn't by himself when he raised Lazarus from the dead. So there have been many instances where Jesus did miracles, and there were many people alive at the time of the day of Pentecost that were eyewitnesses, and there were many people still alive when the New Testament was written that were still eyewitnesses of it. So again, that's one point about the miracles of Jesus that prove that he did those. The second reason, even Jesus' enemies acknowledged his miracles. They just didn't want to give him credit for it. They wanted to explain it away. And there are still people today that try to explain away the miracles of Christ. They try to come up with logical reasons from humankind that might explain some of the miracles that were done. I've heard one on the feeding of the 4,000 and 5,000 that Jesus took the lunch from the young man, and other people felt so guilty that they weren't sharing theirs, or they were so moved that the boy was willing to share that the other people started sharing, and before you know it, people had taken the meals that they brought with them and shared, and everybody had enough to eat. They tried to explain away the miracle that Jesus did. I think if that had been what happened, that's what probably would have been recorded in the Bible, but it's not. So, his enemies acknowledged it, but let's look at a few verses here about what they tried to say about it. One thing they tried to do was they tried to say that Jesus healed by the power of demons. Mark 3:22. Here's what they said about the miracles of Jesus. And the scribes who came down from Jerusalem said, he has Beelzebub, and by the ruler of demons, he cast out demons. Now that's when Jesus responded by saying, a house divided against itself cannot stand. You know, Satan's not going to cast out Satan. So Jesus refuted that. He knew what they were saying, and he refuted it. I've got a very long passage now. I'm going to read to you from. Well, I've got David. Let's go ahead and take yours. John 12, verses 9 through 11. If you read that, please.
When the large crowd of the Jews learned that Jesus was there, they came, not only on account of him, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. So the chief priests made plans to put Lazarus to death as well, because on account of him, many of the Jews were going away and believing in Jesus.
Okay? His enemies acknowledged that Lazarus was raised from the dead. And Lazarus, the very presence of Lazarus there alive, was causing them a lot of trouble. Because people were coming to Jesus, they were believing Jesus because of the great miracle of Lazarus being raised from the dead. He'd been dead for 4 days. And there were people that were there when Jesus had him come out of the tomb and said, Lazarus, come forth. And he comes out alive, still wrapped in the clothing that he was buried in. The rulers probably thought, if we can get rid of Lazarus and Jesus, then maybe we can convince people that Lazarus never did really rise from the dead, that Lazarus was dead all along or something. They were going to try to get rid of the evidence and get rid of Jesus. So that was something that they tried to do. Another thing they tried to do was they tried to conceal, or they tried to just explain it away and say, he's not who he says he is. He's a deceiver. So his enemies, they never did come out and say Lazarus wasn't raised from the dead. They tried to get rid of Lazarus. When the man who had been blind from birth was given a sight on the Sabbath day, and they got so mad, they couldn't deny that a miracle had been performed. What they tried to get the man to do was deny that it was Jesus who did it. It had to be some other power. It couldn't be the power of God. You got to denounce this man. And they tried to first ask the parents, is this your son? Was he really blind? So they tried to explain away his miracles. They did everything they could to try to diminish his influence. Okay, third thing. Numerous authors recorded the miracles of Christ. Sometimes they gave different details. Sometimes the details or the accounts are very similar. Sometimes there are some differences. There's enough differences that sometimes we can piece together and get a clearer picture because, for example, Matthew may tell us something that Mark didn't, or Luke may tell us something that John didn't. A few of the miracles are recorded in all four Gospels, but most of them are recorded in more than one place. I'm going to read to you now something from Kyle Butts that these are his thoughts on the way the Gospels portray the miracles. And this is starting on page 78 and 79 of the book Reason to Believe. Unlike Islam and Mormonism, each of which relies on the accounts, writings of one alleged inspired man, Muhammad and Joseph Smith respectively, Christianity rests upon the foundation of multiple writers. Consider also that certain miracles Jesus performed, specifically the feeding of the 5,000 and his resurrection, are recorded in all four gospel accounts. Furthermore, the writer's attestation of Jesus' life and miracles is similar enough so that as not to be contradictory, but varied enough so that one cannot reasonably conclude that they participated in collusion in order to perpetrate a hoax. Truly, the fact that multiple writers attest to the factuality of Jesus' miracles should not be taken lightly and dismissed with the wave of a hand. So he's pointing out the fact that you've got multiple sources. You're not just having to take one person's word for it. You've got multiple sources that are recording the fact that Jesus performed miracles. And they're giving different slants on it. Okay, the fourth reason. The miracles of Jesus did not involve trickery. There are a lot of people today that believe they perform miracles. And I don't know if it's as prevalent today. Maybe we don't hear about it because so many other things going on. But I know when I was a kid, there would be little towns I lived in West Tennessee. It seemed like once or twice a year there would be a tent revival from some denominational preacher that came in. Usually, I better not mention that. But usually some person would come in and they were going to do healings. And a lot of times the healings that they did bore no resemblance to what Jesus did. They could usually be explained away. Somebody's got a psychological illness or something very mundane or ordinary, then they claim a great healing. I don't know if this is true or not. I won't say, well, Andy's there, so I guess I can say preacher story. But I have heard this told from back in the 50s or 60s that there was a man who was a minister who had lost one of his arms in an accident. And he heard that one of these preachers was coming to the town he lived in. So he went to the tent meeting, and when they asked for people to come up and be healed, what was happening is they were screening the people before they would bring them out in front of the crowd. So they were screening them. They weren't going to heal anybody. They were going to heal people that they could actually make the crowd think were being healed. So when they talked to him, he said, I would like to have my arm restored. I lost an accident many years ago. I would like to have my arm restored. And you've said that you can perform the same miracles as Jesus. So this is what I would like to have done. And they tried to talk him out and said, you don't want to do this. Because when you get to heaven and have your new body, you're going to have 2 arms. But if I heal this arm, you're going to have 3 arms in heaven. You don't want to go through eternity with 3 arms. And the guy said, I'll take that chance. You know, if I can have 2 arms here, I'll take the chance of going through eternity because heaven's going to be perfect. I could be perfectly happy with 3 arms. But they would not take him up on the stage to heal him. So he kind of put them in a spot, and they just kind of backed him out of the way. They didn't want him out there in front of the crowd. Again, I assume that's true, but who knows? I couldn't find it on. I didn't even look on Snopes. I didn't think anything like that would be on there. But a lot of the things that get taken for miracles today can be explained away. And some of the things, they may convince people emotionally where they might can overcome pain and do something on the spot. And if you go back and visit that same person a month later, they may be back in the same shape. A lot of the miracles today are somebody's got chronic pain, they heal them of that pain, and a lot of times that healing is not going to last. It's an emotional response because somebody believes, but it's not lasting. It's not like Jesus did. So in the miracles of Jesus, He did things that we can see. He raised the dead. Witnesses were to that. He restored sight to the blind. He made the lame walk. When He turned water into wine, when He turned loaves and fish into multiple times over to feed a crowd, those are things that could be touched. Those are things that could be tasted. Those are things that could be seen. They weren't psychological phenomenon that somebody was engaged in trickery might try to use. He stilled a storm. And they're witnesses to that. Can you imagine how much money somebody can make today if they had the ability to still the storm? I remember back when I was young, there was a hurricane brewing out in the Atlantic. And Pat Robertson got on his TV show and said, this is happening because of the evil right here in Virginia Beach. All the evil stuff that's being accepted now and going on. That's why this storm is brewing out in the Atlantic. It's going to come on shore. God is going to punish us. And on the 700 Club, Pat Robertson prayed that storm would move away. And in a day or two, it moved out to sea and never did come ashore. And he said, Virginia Beach has repented. And that's why this happened. So he kind of took credit. I guess he gave the credit to God. But he kind of took credit for stopping a hurricane at that time. That's a lot different. Something's offshore that never comes on and being in the middle of the storm and stopping it. Jesus was in the middle of the storm and stopping it. Now, this doesn't really have anything to do with the proof, but I still remember hearing this a long time ago. In a youth setting I was in, a youth group setting, the speaker was saying, why did Jesus tell His disciples in the boat, "O ye of little faith"? Why did He say that? And He would go around the room. He had us all read it. He went around the room. He was asking one by one, why do you think Jesus said they had a lack of faith? Nobody got the answer he was looking for. There were some pretty good answers, but nobody got the answer he was looking for. The answer he was looking for was this. Before they ever set out, Jesus said, let's go to the other side. They didn't believe Him. Jesus had already told him, we're going to the other side. They were worried they were going to sink in the middle of the Sea of Galilee in a storm because they didn't believe Jesus when he said we're going to the other side. And I don't know if that's why he said, oh, you have little faith, but it makes sense to me. Because if Jesus says we're going somewhere, you're going to get there. And they should have believed that. Okay, let's move on. There's a quote from a man named R.C. Trench about the miracles of Jesus, and I'm going to read to you now. Here's what Mr. Trench says. He's talking about how important it is that we have a record of the miracles of Jesus. Our loss would be irreparable if the miracles were absent from our sacred history, if we cannot point to them there. It is not too much to say that the absence would be fatal. There are indeed two miracles, that of the incarnation and that of the resurrection, which round the whole scheme of redemption revolves. Around which the whole scheme of redemption revolves, and without which it would cease to be a redemptive scheme at all. But we are speaking here not of miracles whereof Christ was the subject, but of those which He did. And of them too we affirm that they long belong to the very idea of a Redeemer, which would altogether be incomplete without them. So not only were the miracles of Christ a witness of His deity to the people that saw Him, His readers 2,000 years later. It should be something that inspires us to believe that Jesus did what He said He did, because we have so much evidence in the Scriptures if we do indeed believe the Scriptures. And the last one is the miracles of Jesus defy logical explanation. This is the one I left off. You can't explain taking one sack lunch and feeding 4,000 people, or something similar and feeding 5,000 people. You just can't explain that away. You can't explain away stealing a storm, or a person that was lame from birth. When he's adult, he can walk with no medical procedures involved. You can't explain somebody's being born blind to suddenly gain their sight, or a person that's got leprosy to be cured with a word. The miracles of Jesus are not things that we can explain away. They are not something that a human being can do. Okay, moving on now to two of the biggest things that lead credence to His deity: the birth of Jesus and the resurrection of Jesus. Making sure. Mike, I skipped what I was going to have you read. No, go ahead. Would you read Mark 6, 1-6 for me, please? This is about the rulers ignoring the power of Jesus. I messed up on my count there. Go ahead.
Mark 6, 1-6. Jesus left there and went to His hometown, accompanied by His disciples. When the Sabbath came, He began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard Him were amazed. Where did this man get these things? They asked. What's this wisdom that has been given Him, that He does even miracles? Isn't this the carpenter? Isn't this Mary's son and the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? Aren't His sisters here with us? And they took offense at Him. Jesus said to them, only in His hometown, among His relatives, and in His own house is a prophet without honor. He could not do any miracles there except lay His hands on a few sick people and heal them. And He was amazed at their lack of faith.
Okay, one of the things that I think we can get out of this is Jesus wasn't appreciated like He should have been in His hometown. And that's a pretty natural thing. Something not even on the same scale, but I can think of that makes me relate to this, is I can remember several people that I've had the opportunity as a coach at Lipscomb, and I've known them from elementary school on. And I see them every day just about. And a couple of those guys, when they got in high school, they were tremendous athletes. One of them I'm thinking of ended up playing at Vanderbilt. And I had a hard time thinking about him being that good. When he started getting interest from coaches and started being recruited, a guy named Jonathan Schaub, some of y'all remember him, about 20 years ago he played at Vanderbilt. I'm just thinking, yeah, he's a good player, but really, Vanderbilt, SEC? Because I'm still thinking about the little fifth grader, the little sixth grader. I'm having a hard time seeing him the same way those people were. I wonder if that's what happened with Jesus. This guy's a prophet? This guy does miracles? That's Joseph and Mary's boy. He used to work in the carpenter shop. How can he be doing that? I just wonder if that was part of the issue there in his hometown. Might have been something else. It might have just been they didn't want to believe because they weren't looking for a Messiah like him. Okay, moving forward to the birth and resurrection. His birth was predicted. We looked at several things in here 2 weeks ago when we were looking at some of the evidences from the Bible, but let's just review those two. Isaiah 7:14 says this, "Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel." So that's a prediction. Micah 5:2, "But you, Bethlehem, Ephrathah, though you are little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of you shall come forth to me the one to be ruler in Israel, whose goings forth from old to everlasting." Jesus wasn't just born by chance in Bethlehem. It was predicted. And God had to use something to get him to Bethlehem because his parents lived in Nazareth. So the occasion was the census when everybody had to go to their own hometown. I don't think it was a coincidence that happened. And it happened at the time that Mary was about to give birth. God knew, he probably knew 1,000 years before what he was going to do. He probably knew at the beginning what he was going to do. But he knew those things were going to take place, and it was predicted it was going to happen in Bethlehem, and it did happen in Bethlehem. Now, the genealogies, this is something I had never really thought about. I should have, but I never really thought about it as much as I did when I read this. In the genealogies of Jesus, both in Matthew and in Luke, there are very carefully worded descriptions of Jesus when you compare it to everybody else. In Matthew, I'm a place. Okay, Matthew 1:16. Here's what we read. And Jacob begot Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom was born Jesus, who is called Christ. Every other person was begotten. But when it got to Joseph, it didn't say Jesus or Joseph begot Jesus. It said Joseph was the husband of Mary, to whom was born Christ. And then in Luke 3:23 starts out the genealogy by saying this. Now Jesus himself began his ministry at about 30 years of age, being, and then a parenthetical expression, as was supposed, the son of Joseph, the son of Heli. Wayne Jackson has some views on this, and I'm going to read to you from page 80 and 81. And he says this. In listing the legal genealogy of Christ from Abraham to Joseph, Matthew used the term begot no less than 39 times. Yet when he came to Jesus, the word is conspicuously dropped from his vocabulary. He simply says, Joseph was the husband of Mary, of whom was born Jesus, who is called Christ. This is a carefully worded testimony to the virgin birth. Luke also, in guarded statement, notes that Jesus was the son, as was supposed, of Joseph. I think that's significant because Jesus was not the son of a human man. He was the son of God. He had an earthly mother. He had a heavenly father. And the Bible makes sure that not only that's predicted, but when they went through the genealogy of Christ, they made sure they pointed that out. Okay, the next point. If the virgin birth is false, then Jesus deserved the death penalty. Okay, I've got a couple of passages I want to read and then explain what I mean by that. First one I'm going to read to you is 2 Corinthians 5:21. It says this, For he made him who knew no sin to be sin for us, that we might become the righteousness of God in him. Paul is making the claim here that Jesus knew no sin. Jesus claimed to be born of a virgin. If he wasn't, Jesus is not sinless because he's a liar. So if he lied about the virgin birth, if that wasn't true, then he deserved to be crucified. Okay, Leviticus 24:16 says this, And whoever blasphemes the name of the Lord shall surely be put to death. All the congregation shall certainly stone him, the stranger as well as he who is born in the land. When he blasphemes the name of the Lord, he shall be put to death. Jesus made himself equal to God. by saying he was the Son of God. There were several times I can think of the time when Jesus said, I am. When he talked about Abraham saw my day, and they questioned him, well, you're not even 40 years old. How could you know Abraham? And Jesus said, I am. Before Abraham was, I am, which was a reference to the fact that he was deity. And they were ready to stone him on the spot, and he was able to escape. Another reference from the book that I want to read about this is taken from, find the page. That is not, okay, never mind. I'm going to get to the reference in a minute. I'm on the wrong point. Ellis, would you read for us 1 Corinthians 15, 3 through 8, please?
For I delivered to you as of first importance what I also received, that Christ died for our sins in accordance with the Scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day in accordance with the Scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas, then to the 12, and he appeared to more than 500 brothers at one time, most of whom are still alive, though some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James and to all the apostles. Last of all, as to one untimely born, he appeared to me.
Okay, his resurrection proved his deity. His enemies knew he predicted it. We talked a little bit 2 weeks ago about the fact that they tried to prevent the body from being removed from the tomb, so they put guards there, and they couldn't stop it. He still rose from the dead. There was no body, and there were witnesses. Paul revealed at least 500 at one point, saw him at one time. So, that's another example that proves his deity. Okay, we're running close on time. Let's move on down to C. His life and impact on the world arguably had more influence on mankind than any other figure in the history of the earth. And what I was going to read to you a minute ago is from this. So I'll get to that in just a second. Jesus lived a pure life. A couple of verses about that. Hebrews 4:15 says, "For we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses, but was in all points tempted as we are, yet without sin." Jesus faced the same temptations we face. He never sinned. He never gave in to temptation. Being tempted is not wrong. I'm in a class on Sunday mornings, and we talked about that the other day. But being tempted is not wrong. Everybody's tempted. Jesus was tempted. The sin comes in when you give in to the temptation. Satan knows what he can tempt us with. Satan thought he knew what he could tempt Jesus with. It didn't work with Jesus. It works with us all the time, probably on a daily basis. It didn't work with Jesus. Jesus understands, but he never sinned. 1 Peter 1:19 says, "But with the precious blood of Christ as a lamb without blemish and without spot." So he was a perfect sacrifice for our sins. Now, Jesus had vast influence from his birth until the present. Andy covered many of those things last week. Jerry, would you read Matthew 26, verses 59 through 66, please?
All the way to 66.
Yes.
Now the chief priests, the elders, and all the council sought false testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but found none. Even though many false witnesses came forward, they found none. But at least two false witnesses came forward and said, "This fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and to build it in 3 days." And the high priest rose and said to him, "Do you answer nothing? What is it that these men testify against you?" But Jesus kept silent. And the high priest answered and said to him, "I adjure you by the living God that you tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God." Jesus said to him, "It is as you say. Nevertheless, I say to you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his clothes, saying, "He has spoken blasphemy. What further need do we have of witnesses? Look, now that you have heard his blasphemy, what do you think?" They answered and said, "He is deserving of death."
Okay, going back up to the point, these kind of are similar in part B, number 3. If the virgin birth is false, if Jesus wasn't who he said he was, he deserved to be crucified by the law of Moses because he was a blasphemer. He claimed to be deity and he's not. So if Jesus was not who he said he was, then the crucifixion was justified under the law of Moses. If he's who he said he was, he absolutely in no way deserved to die the way he did. He only did it as a sacrifice for our sins. Now, talking about his influence on the world, I want to read 2 excerpts from the book. One is from a man named Philip Schaff. He said this: "This Jesus of Nazareth, without money and arms, conquered more millions than Alexander, Caesar, Mohammed, and Napoleon. Without science and learning, he shed more light on things human and divine than all philosophers and scholars combined. Without the elegance of schools, he spoke such words of life as were never spoken before or since, and produced effects which lie beyond the reach of orator or poet. Without writing a single line, he set more pens in motion and furnished themes for more sermons, orations, discussions, learned volumes, works of art, and songs of praise than the whole army of great men of ancient and modern times together." And then from a man named Bernard Rahm, he wrote this: "Whether Jesus be a man or God, whether the Gospels be mainly fiction or fancy, certainly an historic person named Jesus gave certain men such an impact as to be unequaled by far in the entire annals of the human race. After nearly 2,000 years, the impact is not all spent, but daily there are people who have tremendous revolutionary experiences which they associate with Jesus Christ, be he dead or risen in heaven. The personality of Jesus is without parallel. It is all unique and comparable." And then Chad Ramsey wrote this, reflecting on those 2 quotes: "Could a man who made so many significant claims, whose actions were not performed in a corner but in the public arena, whose manner of life and teaching were severely scrutinized, yet who still maintained the ability and influence men to live lives of self-denial, have been anything other than genuine?" Okay, kind of the conclusion. We're just about out of time, so it's going to work out pretty well. There's one thing I was going to do. I wasn't going to have time to do it anyway. I couldn't get into the network on my computer. But there are a lot of people today that don't believe in Christianity, but they have to acknowledge that Jesus lived. And one of the popular conclusions is Jesus was a good man. He taught a lot of good moral lessons, and that's about the size of it. You know, he's maybe was the Zig Ziglar. Y'all may not know who Zig Ziglar was, but he was the Zig Ziglar of the first century. He just taught good things about living, common sense. C.S. Lewis says that's not even possible. C.S. Lewis says this, that there are only 3 logical conclusions we can make about Jesus. He's either a liar, he's a lunatic, or he's the Lord. And there's no other possibility. And if we really stop and think about it, Jesus just being a good man who gave a lot of great advice on living a pure life, that's not even possible with what happened. I'm going to read a quote from Lewis now. This is on page 83 and 84 of the book. It says this: "How must we view Jesus of Nazareth? Was he merely a great moral teacher? Was he a motivator of men? Or was he more?" C.S. Lewis made this very clear where our options actually are. And now it's a quote from Lewis. "I'm trying here to prevent anyone from saying the really foolish thing that people often say about him. I'm ready to accept Jesus as a great moral teacher, but I don't accept his claim to be God. This is one thing we must never say. A man who was merely a man and said the sort of things Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He would either be a lunatic on a level with the man who says he is a poached egg, or else he would be the devil of hell. You must make your choice. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else he's a madman or something worse. You can shut him up for a fool. You can spit at him and kill him as a demon. Or you can fall at his feet and call him Lord and God. But let us not come here with any patronizing nonsense about his being a great human teacher. He did not leave that open to us. He did not intend to." If Jesus wasn't who he said was, Christianity is the greatest hoax that's ever been performed on mankind. Millions of people have died for the cause of Christ. Millions of people have lost everything they had. They've lost their businesses. They've lost their family. They've given up things for the cause of Jesus Christ. If Jesus isn't the Son of God, then I think the only two alternatives are he's either a liar, because he said he was, and he said over and over again, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. You've got to follow me. Or he was a stark, raving lunatic. Now, there have been some men in history, I guess some women in history too, that have led a lot of people astray. Some of them have done it on purpose, and some of them have been lunatics. I think they actually believed the stuff they said, but they still led people to their death. Jesus led people to their death because there was going to be eternity afterwards. They were going to live forever. And as he said, don't fear the person that can kill you on this earth. Fear the person that can take your soul. Okay, one of the things I'd hope to do, and I left you a way to find it here, is watch a video by a man named S.M. Lockridge. It's called That's My King. Has anybody ever seen it? It's very inspirational. It's a speech he made back in 1976, I think. The whole speech is an hour and 6 minutes. And it doesn't seem like an hour and 6 minutes. You don't have to watch that much. You can get little clips on YouTube, 3, 4, 5 minutes. And he's just going through all these superlatives of Jesus from the Bible, who Jesus is, what Jesus did. He's a black minister. I'm not sure what denomination he's with, but it is a very, very moving and powerful sermon. So if you get a chance and want to get on YouTube, 3 or 4 minutes, every time I see it, I get shivers running down my back. I mean, it is really inspirational. It's really powerful.
What's his name?
S.M. Lockridge, and do a YouTube search for That's My King. Over and over again, so that's my king. Do you know him? I want to tell you about him. It's really, really a good message. Hope everybody has a great week. Andy will be teaching next week. We've just got 2 more weeks left in this quarter. So we'll try to wrap up things over the next couple of weeks. Thank you.